What's up, homie? Today we're diving deep into the first house of astrology. Let's say you want to get to know someone, and maybe you have seduced and schemed your way into finding out their birth time, or maybe you asked for it fine. Anyway, so you have the information and you want to understand their birth chart quick. You want to get to know who they are. The first house is the part of the chart that's going to give you the most bang for your buck when you're trying to get in, get out of there, like Joanne the scammer before anybody realized you were even there. Or if you are personal self-awareness or self-assessment or who you are, then the first house is great for that too. Today we'll look at the meanings of the first house and explore some examples of how certain planets in or impacting the first house may show up in a person's chart. This ain't your regular schmegular house tour, so stick around to check it out after the beat drops. As I said, we're trying to get in and out of the chart. Anyone notices, we're seducing and scheming, okay? So between the ascendant and the first house, we're going a very good story of who the person is. Let's talk about the ascendant, which is a point in the sky that helps us define where the first house begins. The ascendant is a significator of life, and by association, so is the first house. This is because the sun rises at the ascendant each morning on the eastern horizon. The ascendant is captured based on the moment that we rise into the world. So the sign of your ascendant is your rising sign. Our life is coming into being in this moment at the ascendant. If you're using a quadrant house system, the ascendant will mark the beginning of the first house. The ascendant will fall somewhere within the first house. But the ascendant degree and sign of the ascendant give us the rising house sign in a whole sign chart. So again, the ascendant shows us where we're entering into our lives. So it goes to show that the first house would be a house of life, vitality, and health. And I know some of you are saying, the sixth house is a house of health. Actually, the sixth house is a house of illness, not a house of health. From the first house, we get an understanding of what your constitution is like. Is this a healthy person? Will this person live for a long time? What will their quality of life be like? Notably, I find this interesting. When you have a solar return chart or a lunar return chart where the first house from your natal chart is rising in that particular year, then you tend to have key milestone events happening in your life in terms of things that you will remember for the rest of your life because they impact your life so greatly because it is the first house, your house of life, that is rising. In my own chart, I had a lunar return that was a first house lunar return, and in that particular month, I experienced something that was very much like a lifetime movie drama. And I will likely remember that for the rest of my life, for better or for worse, unless I do some hypnotherapy to help me forget. It won't always be a bad thing that has happened, but it will be something that is memorable. The first house also signifies the personality and manner of expression. So it's the way you act, the way you act. And how are you expressing your soul through your body? So if you have Saturn in your first house or on your ascendant, or you have Capricorn or Aquarius rising, then there's a tendency to be someone who's more responsible, someone who carries the weight, someone who may carry stress. They come across more serious, may have had to grow up more quickly because Saturn is associated with heaviness and aging and responsibility and duty and even anxiety and fear. So those things may come into play as well. But there's a sense of structure that comes with Saturn too. So this person may be someone who can develop a sense of structure or build over time because Saturn tends to help things build a legacy with age or to grow with age or to improve with time because you're learning these lessons over time that eventually get you to a better place or a more practical place at least. With Mars in the first house or ruling the first house, so with Aries rising or Scorpio rising, this is going to be someone who's a bit more impulsive perhaps, a bit more active, driven, intense, could be any of those things, more passionate as well. Mars, as I've said before, rules the survival instinct. So these people are going to be more focused on surviving, and people who have Mars rising tend to be a little bit feisty. With Venus in the first house, or with Taurus or Libra ruling the first house, you're going to see a little bit more sweetness and softness and a tendency toward developing relationships and connections with sweet and loving energy. If you have Uranus on the ascendant or in the first house, you're going to be experiencing more instability. This is someone who is more of a rebel, someone who is a bit more untraditional in how they operate, someone who's willing to go against the grain. Those are all Uranian types of energy, right? It's that kind of person who's operating out of the blue or suddenly, or it feels like they are doing things that shake things up or shake up the status quo. Oftentimes also with Uranus on the ascendant, this can represent someone who moved around a lot when they were a young person. The ascendant can also represent the environment that we find ourselves in, or specifically the environment that we were born into or grew up in. Those are just a few examples of planets in or ruling the first house and how they can operate. However, there is a huge caveat to that, and I will share that caveat very soon later in this video. But generally, these are the types of things that you would expect from these planets in or ruling the first house. I saved my favorite first house meaning for last. So the first house can also tell us about how you look. So your stature, your complexion, characteristics about your skin and hair, what type of body you have in terms of the form and shape. And for me, this can make astrology feel a little bit more like a party trick sometimes, when you can really just look at someone and see what sign they are or what planets they have operating in their chart strongly. And that can be a little fun. Well, if you're lucky enough to have a face card that never declines, then you can thank your first house for that in a lot of cases. The same is true if your mug is a bit unfortunate. Blame it on the first house. And I say this because the first house has a huge impact on your physical appearance. Also look at the sun, the moon, and other things. But it is going to definitely impact you because, again, the first house and the ascendant show us how you entered the world. So it shows how you show up for people as well, physically. When you have certain planets transiting your first house, you may experience changes in your personality or the things that you're spending your time focused on. You may also see changes in your physical appearance as well. A really important thing to note here is the role of the first house ruler in the chart. The first house ruler, I've talked about house rulership before, so I'll link to a video where I mentioned that so you can figure out what your first house ruler is. But looking at the first house ruler, that is a representation of you in the chart. When other planets in the chart aspect your chart ruler, those planets are aspecting you. For example, if the ruler of your 7th house is squaring the ruler of your first house, you and your partner or you and your clients don't have some problems. You will also want to look at the location of the ruler of the first house. That's going to tell you something about what motivates the individual whose chart it is. If the ruler of the person's first house is located in the 10th house, then they're going to be more than likely motivated by their career or their public image. If the ruler of the person's first house is located in the 7th house, then partnerships, romantic or otherwise, are going to be an area of emphasis for them. The sign that the ruler of the first house is in is also going to add additional layers to how this person shows up in the world. Maybe they have Saturn ruling their first house. Again, Saturn is structured, anxious, rules-oriented, sometimes fearful, can be a little bit heavy. But you take that Saturn into a sign like Pisces and things shift. Saturn isn't quite as strong in Pisces. There is a sense of boundlessness that comes into Pisces as well. So that structure that we get in Saturn goes away in some sense. Things have to be a little bit more flexible when Saturn goes into Pisces. Boundaries dissolve, and so do binaries. What was straight before is now wavy. A couple other things just as we wrap up. If we're looking at the chart of a country, like the United States, for example, then the first house is going to represent the people of the country and just the country itself. And I realized I didn't mention this in my 7th house video, but it's important to note that houses 1, 4, 7, and 10 in the chart are known as angular houses. These are houses that when something is placed there, it tends to have more visibility in your life or becomes more powerful in your chart. Well, we've done it, homies. You've schemed your way into some additional details about someone else, or hopefully about yourself too. If you have a little more time to look into the chart, I recommend checking out the videos on the 2nd and 7th houses as well, and other house-related videos as we move forward. If you learned something from this video, give it a big thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're interested in learning more astrology, hypnosis, and tarot. And if you'd like to book a birth chart reading with me, feel free to reach out at homegirlastrology.com/astrology. I'll link it in the description below. Thanks so much for being here, homies. Peace.